On today's show, what have we learned about Anthony Edwards through his impressive play for Team USA this offseason? Is he poised to take the superstar leap this next year? And can a healthy Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony-Towns be enough for the Minnesota Timberwolves? What is the ceiling of that team with a healthy Ant and Cat at the helm? It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets back guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can be on everything from spreads to player props and so much more. Right now, we can take a look at the outright betting favorites for Super Bowl 58. The Kansas City Chiefs leading the way at plus 600, the Eagles at plus 800, and then rounding out the top five, if the Buffalo Bills at plus 900, and the Bengals and the 49ers at plus 1,000 points apiece. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you do not want to miss out on. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Wolves, Ben Beecken, who you can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube. Just search Locked On Wolves. Here to help break down some of the play from Anthony Edwards for Team USA, picking up the 99-72 win against New Zealand over the weekend. Now, Ben, what have you kind of seen from Anthony Edwards through his time with Team USA so far to this point?
Yeah, I mean, so either they played 5-6 exhibition games, and then they had this first game of pool play over the weekend against New Zealand. And I actually thought he generally played better at every exhibition game than he did against New Zealand. But for the most part, what we've seen is a lot more. The offense is mostly flowing through him, right? Like I kind of assumed that a lot of things would go through Jalen Brunson, and it kind of did early. But I think as exhibition season wore on, Team USA began to run more and more of their offense through Anthony Edwards. And what I've been most impressed with is actually pretty similar to what I thought he improved, the area in which he improved the most last year for the Timberwolves. And that's actually orchestrating an offense and distributing the basketball on time, on target, making the correct reads with the ball in his hands. We all know he has explosion. He's extremely explosive. Has a quick first step. He can finish over, through, around guys, whatever at the rim. But to see him actually, make decisions with the ball in his hands, including passing the ball, hockey assists, passes to open shooters, driving kicks, all that stuff that he didn't do a ton of his first couple of years in the NBA. We're seeing him look really comfortable doing that for Team USA so far.
Is there a world, Ben, where maybe the best version of Anthony Edwards that we haven't quite seen yet is more of the guy who is orchestrating and running an offense full time? Do you think he has that in his bag, or is he always going to be the type of guard who's more in that two guard mold that you need a primary playmaker alongside him?
I think his role moving forward is the majority of the Timberwolves offense is going to go through him. And that's one of the reasons why I think, one of the many reasons why playing for Team USA is so good for him. And we saw this transition a little bit last season mid-year when the Timberwolves traded D'Angelo Russell and got Mike Conley, who's obviously a much lower usage guy, a really good catch and shoot 3-point shooter. And yes, Conley does run some offense. He runs some pick and roll through Rudy Gobert for the Timberwolves. But what the Wolves want to do is run the majority of their offense through Anthony Edwards, and then off of that, Karl Anthony-Towns. But we saw Ant late last season, especially, well, really all year, kind of be that first guy back off the bench and kind of run the reserve unit. And Chris Finch wants to run the Timberwolves offense through Ant as much as possible because he is so versatile. And so, there's not even, I don't even think you would say there's another guy in Team USA that's at the star caliber level of Karl Anthony-Towns. I mean, like you could argue maybe Brandon Ingram, maybe Jalen Brunson is getting there, but that type of a multi-time all-star guy, in fact, I don't think there's anyone on the team that's a multi-time all-star. And so Ant is the guy, and Steve Kerr said that publicly, and the team has kind of acknowledged that. But everybody else on Team USA is playing off of him. And so Ant has to find a way to distribute to the spot up shooters, to, at times defer to, anybody that's going to be outside the arc ready to shoot the basketball. And so I think this has been a really good, we're only one game into pool play, but so far already it's been a really good experience for Ant to get the chance to kind of be the guy and really run the team when he's on the floor.
I know we just talked about kind of, maybe him shouldering more of those playmaking duties, running the offense, this upcoming season, and what that'll ultimately look like for Ant will be super interesting. But what does he maybe need to do this year? And it could be something on the court. Maybe it could just be an achievement of sorts as far as where the Timberwolves ultimately land throughout the regular season. What does Ant need to do to go from like an upcoming star player to an established star player this season?
I think it's consistency on both sides of the ball. We've seen when he's on, he can be an elite scorer. He can be an elite defender. And I really, truly believe he's a probably top 10, maybe even top 5 on-ball defender when he's completely locked in. And we've even seen that in international play so far in August. But we've also seen, like, even the beginning of the New Zealand game, if you watch that, he had a couple bad turnovers, just kind of dribbled the ball to the opposing team, like wasn't locked in because, hey, it's New Zealand, they're 29th in the world or whatever, and we're going to win this game. There's a handful of games last year you could point to where he did that. And obviously every player is going to have an off night, and it's hard to get up for 82 regular season games. But the Timberwolves aren't exactly in a place where, like, okay, we've been there, done that. And neither has Ant. So until they gain some credibility as a team, and he is a multi-time all-star. He hasn't made an all-NBA team yet. He's got to be more consistent, both with the ball in his hands, from an efficiency standpoint. Yes, he shot a career-high 3-point percentage last year. He got to the line more than any other time in his career, but he shot like under 70% from the free throw line in March, April, and into the playoffs last year. He didn't shoot as many times in the paint last year. He shot more mid-range shots, less in the paint than he did 2 years ago. So some of the shot selection and consistency on offense, and then defensively, I mentioned a minute ago, he could be a legit lockdown defender, but occasionally he has these off-ball lapses. Occasionally he's not fighting through screens. He's not, putting forth that full effort. But when he does, he's legitimately one of the best two-way players in the entire league. And so it's just finding that level of consistency. On offense, it's mostly shot selection and overall efficiency. On defense, it's mostly just staying locked in, whether on ball or off ball.
Now, unfortunately, this past season, Karl Anthony-Towns played just 29 games. What should the ceiling look like for a Timberwolves team with ideally a healthy Ant and a healthy Towns for this entire upcoming year?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking ceiling, I think it's low 50s wins in a top 4 seed in the West. And I know the West is really difficult, and this team only won 42 games last year, but the roster didn't get worse this offseason. And Karl Anthony-Towns, as you mentioned, played in 29 games. He missed 52 consecutive games with the calf injury, and Rudy Gobert played the worst season he had in several years. And we could discuss whether or not that's because he's on the wrong side of 30 or he's just not a fit with Karl Anthony-Towns. That could be part of it. But I don't think he's going to fall off a cliff in terms of production. I don't think he's going to be significantly worse than he was last year. So I think just by virtue of, knock on wood, being healthy this season and having the core of the same team together, subbing in Mike Conley for D'Angelo Russell, this team's going to be better than 42 wins this year, given relative health. And we can say that about any team. So I think most likely scenario is mid to upper 40s wins, but best case is certainly, if Anthony Edwards makes the leap that everyone wants to see him make and knows he's capable of making. And if Karl Anthony-Towns is the cat we saw 2 or 3 years ago, pre-calf injury, I don't see any reason why this team can't win 50 games and compete for home court advantage at the start of the playoffs. They really have no business, being a play-in team again this year, given relative health. So the ceiling remains really high for a team that still has 2 young, and actually go ahead and include Jaden McDaniels in there as yet a young budding star, obviously not to the level of Anthony Edwards, but this team still has a lot of upside.
Is it fair to say, Ben, going into this next year, is this a make or break season for Cat in Minnesota? Does it feel like?
I think so. And mostly because of the Gobert trade, honestly. I think Cat just re-upped last summer with the Superbacks, and he wants to be in Minnesota. He said that multiple times. Him and Anthony Edwards get along great. But there's, if this year doesn't work out for the team or for Cat, Cat's going to be easier to trade than Rudy Gobert. He just is. And I think the only conclusion that we could draw after this year, unless again, there's some sort of major injury, would be that that's not a fit. The Rudy Cat thing's not a fit. So then somebody's got to go, and it might be head coach Chris Finch. It might be Karl Anthony-Towns. It could be both of them. But you're going to still get, and I don't know that Cat's trade value, given this scenario, say the Wolves only win 44 games this year and get, the 7-6 seed, lose in the first round, whatever, that would not be a successful year. And I don't think Cat's trade value would be really high, but it's going to still be higher than Rudy Gobert. And you still have another year, probably 2, with the player option on Gobert's contract. So very likely, I think Cat would be traded either at the deadline if the first part of the season goes terribly, or next summer. But again, I think given relative health, there's a lot of hope for a pretty strong bounce back year for both Cat and the Wolves.
What more will we learn about Anthony Edwards as his top dog experience with Team USA continues this offseason? And how are the Timberwolves going to look this next year, hopefully with a little bit more health for Karl Anthony-Towns in the works? You're going to have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Wolves. Ben, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Jackson.